Good morning, ladies. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shir. We're in the middle of the third chapter of Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah. If you have an English Tanya in front of you, I'm beginning on page 853. Lessons in Tanya, page 853, where it says v'hamoshel hazeh. Actually, this is the beginning of the Tanya for the 11th of Sivan. If you're using an all Hebrew Tanya, then we're on page what's called Ayin Ches Amud Beis. Daf Ayin Ches. V'hamoshel hazeh, a little more than halfway through the page. So the Alter Rebbe here is introducing us, or is giving us a mashal. This mashal is referred to quite a bit in the teachings of Chassidus, and I want to learn the mashal together with you again. We learned it last week, but I want to review it. Last week we spoke about this mashal more in the context of Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah, but this week I want to really zoom in on the mashal itself and really try to analyze and sort of get what the Alter Rebbe wants with this mashal. So Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah, again, just a very, very, very brief summary. Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah so far is teaching us the concept that Chassidus refers to as Achdus Havaya. Achdus Havaya, according to Chassidus, means, or Achdus Hashem. Achdus Hashem means that Hashem is not merely the only deity. Hashem is not merely the only God. Hashem is not merely the only one with power and control, but actually Hashem is the only real, true existence. And although we believe that Hashem created a heaven and an earth, physical existences and spiritual existences, and all sorts of other things, what just happened? We still there? Yes? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Baruch Hashem. Just checking.
I'm still here.
All right, Baruch Hashem. Although we believe that Hashem created all these other things, nevertheless, these other things, they don't really exist. They exist, but they don't really exist. Again, which is interesting, because Hashem created them. So what would be the benefit in saying that they don't, why would Hashem create things, not really create them? So the answer is that Hashem wanted them to exist, but Hashem didn't want them to, quote, really exist, not have any real existence. They should exist in a way where they're constantly dependent for their existence on Hashem himself, and Hashem himself is recreating them every single second. And so they don't, in the words of the Alter Rebbe in Perek Gimel, he said, when you think about this, you come to the conclusion that relative, in comparison to the energy of Hashem, which is referred to the words of Hashem that create these things and keep them in existence, they don't really exist. In fact, they are really ayin ve'efes mamash. Okay. And then he gives a mashal. So the mashal, again, we started talking about this last week, but I want to kind of really go into the heart of this mashal. So the mashal is from the Kumah. So let's read a few lines inside. V'hamashal hazeh hu oir hashemesh. There is this concept, there is oir hashemesh, the light of the sun. Hameir la'oretz v'ladorim. The light of the sun shines upon the world and all those who live on it. Shehu ziv v'oir hamispashet meguf hashemesh. This is light that emanates from the sun itself. And everybody can see it. It's apparent. It's visible. The light of the sun is a visible existence. It says the Alter Rebbe, this is obvious. That this light that we see emanating from the sun exists within the sun itself. Exists within the sun itself, that is in the heavens. It's obvious, says the Alter Rebbe, that if this light emanates from outside, it's obvious that the light which emanates outside of the sun exists within the sun itself. Why? Why is it so obvious? If the light of the sun can shine so far away, how much more so does it have the ability to shine in its own place? Rak, only, The only thing is, Shesham b'mkoim mamish, that over there in the place of the sun, nechshav haziv hazeh, this ray of the sun is considered ayin ve'efes mamish, is considered ayin ve'efes mamish, ki botel b'metzias, it's completely nullified in its existence relative to the guf, relative to the sun itself, which is the source of the light. That's the source of light. So that's the mashal. Again, the mashal, the Alter Rebbe says, the mashal is from the sun. From the sun emanates light. Now, the light that comes from the sun is a metzias. It's an existence. There is light. There is sunlight. All right, not today in Los Angeles. There isn't much of it. It's a cloudy day, but otherwise, in general, there is light, and even through the clouds, there is some light. There is light that comes from the sun. Says the Alter Rebbe, this is obvious that this light doesn't only exist outside of the sun. This light exists within the sun as well. Why? Because if the sun has the ability to shine so far away, how much more so does it have the ability to shine in its own place? But the only thing is, over there in the place of the sun, this light of the sun, these rays of the sun are bottled b'metzias mamish, right? They're completely nullified in their existence relative to the sun itself. Okay, the Alter Rebbe will go on to say that later on in Perek Gimel, Alter Rebbe will go on to say that so it is. The Alter Rebbe will go on to say that so it is with regard to Hashem creating the world. That Hashem creating the world is like Hashem emanating light. Except that it's not like Hashem emanating light where the light goes out of himself, but it's like Hashem emanating light where the light constantly remains within himself. So therefore, just like the light of the sun, when it exists, as it exists within the sun itself, is completely, quote, bottled, nullified in its existence, so too, when we speak of all of these existences that Hashem created, that come from Hashem, so as they are, since Hashem is everywhere, right? Since Hashem is everywhere, so all of these existences can be compared to everything that Hashem creates, can be compared to the light of the sun as it exists within the sun itself. And just as the light of the sun as it exists within the sun itself is bottled by Metzias Mamash, so too it's true to say that every existence that comes from Hashem can be compared to the light of the sun as it exists within the sun itself. In other words, the Alter Rebbe will articulate this clearly. He'll say, when it comes to this, in one sense, the Alter Rebbe will say, the Moshel and the Nimshol, sun and Hashem are, in one important sense, in this context, there's an important difference, and that is, with regard to the sun, there is a place where the sun is, and there is light that actually emerges from the sun. Whereas, and there is that light of the sun the way it is within the sun. As opposed to, with regard to Hashem, since Hashem is everywhere, so any light that comes from Hashem constantly remains within Hashem, because there's no such thing as light emanating out of Hashem, because there is no such thing as out of Hashem. Hashem is everywhere. So all that exists, including physical existences, exist with the same level of bittul, the same level of nullification, as the light of the sun would exist within the sun itself. And therefore, this is a moshel that's supposed to help deepen our understanding of what it is that's written here, that all the things that Hashem created, all these existences, are bottled by Metzias. Okay. So again, these are the words. This is what's written here in Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah, and we have to learn it. And then after we learn it, we have to try to spend a couple of minutes and try to understand what in heaven's name this means. Why do we need a moshel of a shemesh with oira shemesh, and what does the moshel even really mean? And at the heart of it, what is it trying to teach us, etc. Okay. So in the teachings of Chassidus, we have other masholim, other analogies to help us understand this analogy of the Oira Shemesh. One of the analogies that are given to help us understand this is the moshel, what's called the moshel of somebody being mashpia, somebody having an influence on others, but in a way of a dugma chaya, not by teaching them anything specific, not by speaking to them, but having an impact on the person by way of being a living example. So what does this mean in very short? So there's two, let's say in general, there's two ways to have an impact on someone. There's two ways to change a person's life, to instill within them, the values of Yiddishkeit, of Chassidus, etc. Very generally speaking, right? One way is to sit with the person and to talk to them, tell them stories, teach them Torah, answer their questions, delve with them on a deeper level into their world, and really implant within them the values of whatever it is that you're trying to communicate. That's one way. And if the mashpia is a gifted and talented and hardworking mashpia, and the mushpa, the one who's on the receiving end, is a keli, they're ready and willing to accept this, it can be a very powerful experience. It can really have a significant, very powerful impact on a person's life. That's one way. And we've all had teachers, and pardon the expression, influencers, who have had tremendous influence in our lives by virtue of what they've taught us and the impact that they've had on us, obviously. But then there's another way. There's another way to have an influence, an impact on someone, and that is called being a dugma chaya. Being a dugma chaya means that you actually have, in the realm of being a dugma chaya, you don't need to have any relationship with the person. You don't need to know who they are. You don't need to even be aware of their existence. The mashpia does not need to know that the mushpa even exists. And the mushpa doesn't need to know that the mashpia knows that the mushpa exists. None of that is necessary. Rather, what happens when you have an impact on somebody in a way of a dugma chaya? Again, dugma chaya means by living an example, by being a living example. So the mashpia is basically just living their life. They're basically just doing their thing. They're going about their business. They're not doing anything different than they would if the mushpa was not there. They're busy, v'mazak, doing their thing. But the mushpa, the one who's being influenced, sees, as they observe this mashpia, the way they go about their life, the way they learn, the way they daven, the way they manage their time, the way they talk to people, even other people, they can see in this person tremendous character traits. They can see that the person takes it seriously. They can see that the person works on themselves. They can see that the person davens properly and learns properly, etc., etc. And this has a tremendous, tremendous impact on the person. Tremendous. Dugma chaya. Okay. This is now. How is this a mushal for the shemesh? So I'm going to try to explain. So each way of being mashpia has an advantage and a disadvantage. It has many, but let's focus on one. Each way of being mashpia on somebody, either through actively, let's say, working with them, teaching with them, instilling within them, or just being a dugma chaya, right? Just living your life. Each way has an advantage and a disadvantage. Let's try to explain. So when you work with somebody, it has a tremendous advantage in the sense that you're actually actively, it's called being mislavish, means you enclose yourself in that person's world. And you give them something tangible, if it's intellectually tangible or it's spiritually tangible, you give them values and lessons that they can carry with them for the rest of their life. Even after the exchange between teacher and student is over, and the student walks away, and the teacher walks away, the student can carry the lessons that the teacher has taught them and remember them for the rest of their life. And the student can one day become a teacher and teach those lessons and those ideas and those to others, and so it goes. On the other hand, when you're influencing somebody in a way of being a dugma chaya, you're technically not giving them anything, right? You're not answering their questions. You're not enclothing yourself in the world of the mushba to give them values that they can teach others. All they will later be able to tell others is, I saw a great chassid and it was inspirational to see the way he davened. When he davened, it was just amazing. It was But what? But what was he thinking about while he davened? What? I don't know. What did he learn before he davened? What? How did he do this avoida that he was working on himself? I don't know. I just watched the person and I could tell that this was something amazing. So on the one hand, there's a tremendous advantage to actually giving the person, it's much more pneumistic in a way, when you actually sit and learn with the person, because then you can instill values within them. You can instill teachings within them. You can give them something specific, as opposed to if you're just going about your own business. So the person is really divorced actually from your world. They don't really know what's going on. They can see it's something amazing, but they don't really know what's going on. They don't have hard information on what it is that the person who's a dugma chaya. What really inspires the person who's a dugma chaya? We don't necessarily know. We can see that they're inspired, but we don't know how. On the other hand, there's a tremendous advantage to having an impact on a person in a way that's a dugma chaya, much more than giving the person a specific teaching. What is it? Because when you give a person a specific teaching, so what are they inspired by? They're inspired by you. They're inspired by a specific teaching of yours. They're inspired by a specific idea of yours, maybe something that you said, something that, but it's very specific and it's very small. As opposed to when you're taken by a person and you can see that the person is a dugma chaya. So yes, you don't have hard information on what it is that's inspiring the person, but you're really, in a sense, you're really taking in the totality of the person. You're looking at this person, you're going, wow, this person is consistent. They're real. There's something about them that's majestic, that's incredible. So on the one hand, I don't really know what it is. On the other hand, there's something, quote, shining upon me, which is perhaps much greater or much bigger than I can ever fully grasp. Right? Hasidim will talk about this when they stand in the presence of the Rebbe. Right? So let's say you're standing in the presence of a Rebbe and the Rebbe is teaching something. So there's two ideas, there's two things going on. On the one hand, there's this specific teaching that the Rebbe is teaching right now, the idea, the Torah. But then there's being in the presence of the Rebbe, the fact that the Rebbe is teaching it. So Taka, in this case, you have both, right? You have the specific, and of course, that in the end, we all need both, right? You have the specific teaching that the chassid will remember for the rest of their life. And then you have the awesome experience, the overwhelming experience, the undefinable experience, I should say, of being in the presence of being in the presence of a Rebbe. In the case of dugma chaya, in the case of having an influence on somebody in a way of dugma chaya, there's another element, there's another layer to this. And that's like this. When a person teaches you a specific something, right? It teaches you a specific idea. So, all right, this specific idea could be very powerful, but the recipient doesn't know really, as far as the teacher himself is concerned, how much significance the teacher gives this idea. Really, we're not getting a glimpse into the teacher's real world. Right now, the teacher is teaching. Right now, the teacher is teaching. Okay, but how much does this teaching actually mean to the teacher himself? Now you'll say, what's the difference, right? What's the difference? The difference, listen to the teaching that the teacher teaches. If the teacher does live by it, doesn't live by it, what do you care? So we know, Chazal tell us, words that come from the heart enter the heart. In order for it to be really, really meaningful for the student, it has to be really, really meaningful for the teacher. Okay, so when the teacher teaches it, somehow the student can tell if the teacher really means what they're saying or not. But as long as it's specific teaching, at the end of the day, we're talking about a specific idea. But when we're impacted by a person who is a dugma chaya, who's a living example, it's not that we're impacted by something specific that the person says or does. It's the person themselves that's having an impact on us. All right, that's the mashal. One of the great chassidim of the Alter Rebbe and the Bittul Rebbe, that's a Tzedek, was a chassid by the name of Rabbi Hillel Parachar. So when he would teach chassidus, he would give the analogy that he would give for this is, He says you have a person, a great chassid, who's standing in shul, and he's davening, and he's learned chassidus for many hours beforehand, and he's meditated on godly concepts, and he's working on himself. And as he stands there and davens, his heart and mind are aflame with burning with godly understanding and love and fear of God, and he's in a tremendous state of spiritual excitement. No, says Reb Hillel, and next to him is standing a simple Jew davening with a siddur. And the simple Jew doesn't have any of the understanding, doesn't have any of the emotion, he doesn't have any of the tools, he doesn't have any of the learning, nothing. But they're standing next to each other in shul. So Reb Hillel says, if the inspiration, the excitement of this real chassid, who's learned and davened and prepared for davening for hours, and is davening, and his heart and mind are aflame with godliness, if he's for real, then the person next to him is going to have to be impacted. Now, the person next to him is not shaykh to anything that this person is excited about. Says Rabbi Hillel, yeah, but the person who's standing next to him in shul is not going to be able to just stand there and have a regular kol davening. Something about this person's excitement, it's going to have some kind of impact on him. He's going to shock. What's he going to do? What's he going to do with this impact? He doesn't know what to do with it. He's going to shuckle a little more. He's going to think. He's going to be less tolerant of his own Yetzer Hara driving him crazy with foreign thoughts. It'll have an impact on him too. How do you know if a person is besimcha, right? Chassidus talks so much about a person being besimcha. How do you know if a person is besimcha? One of the ways of knowing is that they make people around them besimcha. It's one of the ways of knowing. A person will say, I'm in tremendous state of simcha, everybody around me is miserable. I'll tell you, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. There's an expression, yoim, a chosid machta sviva. Chosid machta sviva means a chosid creates an environment. If you're the real deal, if you're a chosid, then around you will be an environment. People will be inspired around you, one way or another. I say, I don't have good communication skills. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't have good inspirational skills. I'm not good at inspiring others. Doesn't matter. Okay, it does matter, obviously. But the point is, if you're for real, then somehow or other it's gonna impact. It's gonna impact it's gonna create this kind of environment. If all of us are privileged to know Hasidic Yidden, right? People who are genuinely good, rich, spiritual people. When they walk into a room, when they sit down to fabraying, when they interact with people around them, even if they're not necessarily teaching them novel concepts and Chassidus and Torah that will blow their mind, even if they'll say, the same regular things that everybody else says, so to speak, but somehow when they say it, it's different. Because it's real. And the person is having an impact on those who are around them. All right. So Chassidus says that this idea of being mashpia and having an impact on others in a way of being a dugma chaya, meaning being authentic and by being yourself, this influences those around you. Chassidus says this is a mashal for what we mean when we talk about Oyer HaShemesh. Right? Now the truth is this itself is a 12-hour farbrengen, so to speak, because and it goes both ways, right? It goes both ways. It teaches us the importance of making sure we remain in the company of healthy, positive people, and the tremendous impact that has on us. And on the flip side, on the mashpia side, it reminds us that we have to make a cheshbon hanefesh. And if we're not impacting those around us to one degree or another, right? To one degree, if we're not impacting those around us, then that means we're not sufficiently excited ourselves. When the Rebbe, of course, started to send people on shlichus, so people would ask the Rebbe, "What do you mean? How can you send people on shlichus to places where there's no kosher food and there's no kosher education and there's no shul and there's no minyan? And how can you send a religious Jew to set these types of environments? It's going to have a spiritually negative impact on them. How can you do that?" And one of the classic answers the Rebbe gave is, if you're busy, the Rebbe said, as long as you're involved in having an influence on your surrounding is not going to have an influence on you. If you're busy impacting others, then they won't impact you. It's something we all have to be aware of. Now, there's a flip side to this, because when you're mashpia in a way of dugma chaya, right? If you're only influencing by just being yourself, and you're not actually teaching people, then maybe as long as you're around, your presence will overwhelm them, right? As long as you're standing next to the Hasidic Yid who's davening with great excitement, it'll have an impact on you. But as soon as he leaves, you go back to being the same simple Jew you were before. So obviously that's not enough, because it's not something that the recipient can hold on to in their own right. We need tools, we need skills. But in terms of it having an impact, it's tremendously powerful. Okay. Now let's go to the mashal of the Alter. So the Alter Rebbe says, so this is a mashal. Since Alter Rebbe says here you have a mashal of Oir HaShemesh. So what's Oir HaShemesh? So the reason why Oir HaShemesh is such a powerful mashal is because, like in the analogy of a person who is mashpia in a way of being a dugmachai, in a way of being a living example, the sun, as it is in the heavens, doesn't work at all, doesn't do anything. This is the way Chassidus explains it, to illuminate the world. There's no activity, there's no pa'ula on behalf of the sun to illuminate the world. Now, this is very rare in this physical world that Hashem created, because the rule is kol mania, it's quoted in Chassidus, kol mania misnaneya ba'atzmai, which means that the general rule is, in order to move something, you have to move yourself. If I want to move this bottle cap, right, from here to here, so there's no way of doing it other than moving my hand. Right now you say, well, maybe you can blow it. Okay, but even if I'm going to blow it, I have to blow. Kol mania misnaneya ba'atzmai means when, as a rule, whenever you're going to create some type of change, the change that you're creating involves some type of activity on behalf of the one who's responsible for the change. Chassidus sees in the way the sun is illuminating the world, Chassidus sees in this an exception. Now you'll say, well, what's the exception? The sun is also moving around the world. But that's not the point. The point is, imagine the sun were to stop moving for a second. All right, it doesn't. But imagine the sun were to stop. It would freeze exactly where it is in the heavens. The sun would still fill the world with light. The sun doesn't need to move. The sun doesn't need to do anything. This is an incredibly important point. The sun doesn't need to do anything in order to fill the world with light. The sun just needs to exist. Behimotzai, by virtue of its existence, the nature of the sun's existence is such that if it exists, if it's in the heavens, the whole world is filled with light. The light expands. Its strength, its power is such that it doesn't allow for there to be darkness anywhere in its presence. Wherever it is, will be filled with light. Like in Rabbi Hillel Paracher's mashal, the Hasidic Yid who's davening and learning, and he has eyes burning with Ava V'yira, the power of this is so much that anybody around him has to be impacted. Okay. Says the Alter Rebbe, if that's the case, then we have to say that there's light inside the sun as well. We have to say that there's light. Now, why do we have to say that? Why do we have, if there's light outside of the sun, says the Alter Rebbe, we have to say that there's light inside the sun as well. Why? Because if it could shine so far away, that it could shine within itself as well. Why do we have to say that? So listen to me very carefully. Here's how I understand it. If Ruvain inspires Shimon, does that mean Ruvain is inspired as well? If one Jew inspires another Jew, is the inspirer also inspired as well? Yes or no? The answer is it depends. It depends how Ruvain inspired Shimon. If Ruvain inspired Shimon by teaching him something, he sat down with him and learned with him a sikha, and Shimon walks away and his life is changed, blown away. Is Ruvain inspired? Possible that he's not. It's possible that Ruvain's not inspired. So if Ruvain's not inspired, how did he inspire Shimon? What's the answer? Because in the end, it's not really Ruvain that's inspiring Shimon. It's the Sikha, it's the Perek of Tanya that he studied with him that's inspiring him. As long as Ruvain can teach Shimon a Perek Tanya, Shimon can walk away inspired while Ruvain is not. I wouldn't say, in that case, I wouldn't make the Kal V'chomer. I wouldn't say, if Ruvain can inspire Shimon, Kol Shekain V'Kal V'chomer, that Ruvain himself is inspired. I wouldn't say that. I would say Ruvain should be inspired. I would say if Ruvain isn't inspired, he should ask himself why not. But I wouldn't necessarily say that Ruvain's inspired. It's possible that Ruvain inspired Shimon and didn't get inspired himself. But if Ruvain inspired Shimon by being a Dug Machaya, means he didn't learn with him. He didn't even talk to him. Maybe he didn't even know that he exists. But Ruvain just stood there and davened, ignoring the rest of the world. And next to him was standing Shimon. And Shimon is inspired by Ruvain's davening, even though Ruvain never spoke to him or looked at him. So now if Shimon is inspired by Ruvain's davening, genuinely, then there's no way that Ruvain himself is not inspired. If Ruvain wasn't inspired, then Shimon wouldn't be inspired by Ruvain's davening. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. So that's what Alter Rebbe is saying here. It's a kal v'chomer. If the sun would do another person, if the sun would do some kind of pa'ula, and by that the sun would illuminate the world, right? So then you would say the sun illuminated the world. It did some kind of a person walks into a room and flicks on a switch, the light goes on. Right? Now the person made the room light. The person lights a candle. The person made the room light. Does that mean there's light in the person? Nonsense. Of course not. The person did a particular pull, did a particular act, and the act has a certain impact. Gesundheit. That's not what we're saying over here. Over here, we're saying that the Shemesh doesn't do anything. The Shemesh just exists. The existence of the sun is so powerful that there's light everywhere in the presence of the sun, says the Alter Rebbe. Yeah. So then, if the sun is shining everywhere else, just by virtue of being, then we must say that the sun itself is filled with light. Okay. That's point one. Took me 30 minutes, but I got it out. Okay, that's point one. Now let's analyze. Now let's dissect, says the Alter Rebbe. There's light inside the sun. Let's go back to there's light inside the sun. Let's go back to the Moshe. So there's two people davening next to each other. One is a Chassidish Yid who's prepared for davening for 6 hours and davened for 6 hours, and he's standing in a tremendous state of dveikus and inspiration. Let's call him the Mor. Let's call him the source of light. Next to him is standing a simple Jew who's experiencing a very minimal amount of inspiration by standing next to that person. Let's call the impact that he has on the person standing next to him the light. Now, does this inspiration, the inspiration that the simple person has, is the Chassidish Yid inspired at least as much as the simple person is? Of course, it's much, much, much more. At least as much as that, but Kol Sheken and Kal V'chomer, that it's much, much, much more. Right? This is the Kal V'chomer. Says the Alter Rebbe, if I wanted to conceptually say that the simple person's inspiration, the level to which the simple person is inspired, if I wanted to contrast that, place that in the context of the Chassidish Yid's davening, if I wanted to dissect and say, what does it look like? What does it look like with regard to the light as it exists within the sun itself? Now, what would I say about that? The answer is I would say it's Bittul b'metzias. That's the answer. I don't know if the Alter Rebbe means in a physical sense. In fact, I believe the Alter Rebbe doesn't mean in a physical sense that if you cut up the sun, right, you'll find light inside there. I think that's nonsense. The sun is a ball of some type of gas, and it emanates light, obviously. Light of the sun, as we know it, doesn't exist within the sun. But if somebody says to you, if we could, again, conceptually enter into the ball of the sun itself, would it be dark in there? Or would it be light? So again, it's more of a conceptual question than an actual question. But the answer is neither. There's no darkness in there or light. Not as we know it outside of the sun. What is there? What is in there is the source of light. But definitely in the source of light, there's no darkness. It's just that over there, light means something, means something else. We're entering into the source of the light. Okay. This is the motion. So light as we know it, if we were to go within the sun itself, would exist there. It would exist, but it would exist in a state of complete nullification of existence. In other words, we wouldn't be able to say that it's dark inside the sun, obviously, but also we wouldn't be able to say that it's light. There's no light in the sun, because the even conceptually, the idea of light is completely nullified within the source of the sun, and within the sun itself, which is the source of all light. Okay, this is the analogy. Oh, final point for today. So the Alter Rebbe will say that all of existence can be compared to light that exists within Hashem Himself. Why? So if we've done a good job here explaining it, the next point should make our brains pop. When the Eibishter created the world, right? When the Eibishter created the world, so we say that the Eibishter makes utterances, Yehi Oir, Yehi Rakia, and the existences come into being. The existences come into being. So now let's think for a second. Hashem says, Yehi Oir, let there be light, and light comes into existence as a result of these words, right? Now, let's for a second not talk about the relationship between Hashem and the words, because that's a separate sugi in Chassidus. Let's talk about the relationship between the words that Hashem says and the light that it creates. I appreciate this is a little academic, but here it is. The words that Hashem uttered, Yehi Oir, and the light that comes into being as a result of those words. Would we describe that as kol mania misnanea ba'atzmoi, something that's having an impact, that's creating something, that is creating it through involvement? Would we describe it as a pu'ula, as an activity? Or would we describe it as emerging from it as light emerges from the sun? Again, the question, light emerges from the sun without the sun doing anything. The sun does nothing. The sun just exists, and the light comes from it. Other times when you want to do something, when you want to make some type of change, you have to do an actual activity. Again, if a person wants to move something, they have to actually move something with their hands. Now, how do the Hashem's words, Yehi Oir, Yehi Rakia, how do these words create existences? Does it have to get involved? Does it have to, so to speak, roll up its sleeves and do something? Does it happen on its own? The Pasuk says, Bidvar Hashem, Shomayim Nasu. By the words of Hashem, the heavens are made, come into existence, come into being. That means the words of Hashem, once they're stated, once the words are said, the world comes into being. If it comes into being, that means in the end we're saying that it's like light that comes from the sun. So if it's light that comes from the sun, that means that what's being created, like the light of the sun, is an extension of the sun itself, or revelation of the sun itself. What's being created is an extension of the words of Hashem. Without activity, without work, Hashem doesn't. It says the expression of Chazal. Hashem doesn't create His world through hard work. The whole point of it is Hashem just said, and the world comes into existence. All right, so you'll ask, why did Hashem have to say it? That's a different question. But once it's said, it just happens by itself. If that's the case, says the Alter Rebbe, then it's all a revelation. Then it's all an expression of Hashem Himself. Says the Alter Rebbe, then we have to take it one step further and say that just like the light that comes from the sun, if it were to exist, if we were to trace this back to the sun itself, we would say that it's Bittul b'metzias mamash, completely nullified within the sun itself. So too when it comes to the creation of the world, which is created by Hashem's words, the Hashem speaks the words, and it comes into existence. That means it exists because Hashem wanted to exist. That means the creation of that means, here's the point, that when we say the world being created comes from Hashem, we don't just mean that Hashem is responsible for the existence of let this be the point of today's class. When it's a new understanding in saying that Hashem created the world. It doesn't just mean that Hashem is responsible for the existence of the world. It doesn't just mean that Hashem is the only one who's responsible for the existence of the world. It means the existence of the world is an actual emanation of Hashem. Hashem emanated the world. The world came out from Hashem's existence because Hashem wanted to, and Hashem said, so it came into being. If that's the case, then it's all an extension of Hashem. But since, like in the mashal of the sun, we are all within the sun itself, we are all within Hashem himself. So really the existence of anything else other than Hashem exists within Hashem in a state of complete bittul. Okay. I appreciate that this was a little academic and esoteric. In Mirz Hashem, next week we will continue. Moving on in Perek. All right. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for being here. Shabbos, of course, is Yud Shvat, and Hashem should bless us all to be connected to the Rebbe and to learn Chassidus and to understand it as much as we possibly can, of course.